Hello friends, we're halfway through the year. I've read exactly 50 books and it's time for the mid-year freakout tag. Before we get into questions, I have some stats from the Storygraph. Those 50 books had 15,631 pages. They've been mostly adventurous, mysterious, and dark. I read mostly medium-paced books under 500 pages, and an overwhelming majority are fiction. I have already found 19 5 stars, which is absolutely crazy. I was actually super shocked to find this out because I feel like my reading has not been great this year. I've been disliking things more than usual. I've given out a lot more 2 stars than I typically do, but the books that have been good have been excellent. Those are the stats. Let's get into the question. Kicking it off with my favorite book of the year so far, you will definitely see this on my top 10 of the year. It is Deathless by Kat Valente. Is anyone surprised? I don't think so. Absolute huge shout out to the subscriber who recommended that I read this in my 5-star predictions video because you were so right that I was going to love this. This is a Koshchei the Deathless retelling. It's a Slavic folklore tale and it is the most heartbreaking story of war that I have ever read. The writing in here is absolutely impeccable. It's poetic, it's emotional, it's fantastical. There is a huge fairy tale component to this while still remaining incredibly dark, set both in our world and in a fairy world. The way that we go about telling the story of war and telling the story of our main character Maria Marevna and her relationship with Koshchei the Deathless, which is kind of like this devil figure in Slavic folklore. It remains deeply rooted in our reality and has so many things to say about politics and the way that historical events went down, while also having a lot of things to say about fairy tales and all of the incredible good versus evil and what it is to be human and not human conversations that come out of those stories. I would not be surprised if this remains my #1 book of the entire year. I just absolutely loved this so much. I think the best way that I can convince you to read this is to read you a little clip from this. So this is a quote that I shared in that 5-star predictions video. I'm gonna link it up there and also in the description because I ended up quoting a lot of things from this and I really would encourage you to go back and get a little sampling of things if you're interested in reading this because it is impeccable writing. So this chapter 23, is depicting the blockade of Leningrad and it is told from the Domovoy's perspective, which is like this little house elf type creature. It's incredible. Here is how it begins. Look, I'm holding up my 2 hands and between them is Leningrad. I am holding up my 2 hands and between them is a black space where Maria Marevna is not speaking. She would like to because she thinks a story is like a treasure and can belong to only one dragon. But I make her share. I will not let her have the whole thing. I have this power. I will not let her speak because I love her. And when you love someone, you do not make them tell war stories. A war story is a black space. On the one side is before, and on the other side is after, and what is inside belongs only to the dead. Besides, what happened between the 2 hands I am holding up is squeezed between the pages of the books of the dead, which are written on my hands because I died in that space where Maria Marevna is not speaking. And now it is all clear, and now you understand. For storytelling, a Domovoya is always better than a human because she will not try to make a miserable thing less miserable, so that a boy sitting at his grandmother's knee can nod and say, "The war was very terrible, wasn't it, babushka? But it is all right, because some people lived and went on to be good and have children." I spit on that boy because he thinks only of his own interest, which is that he should be born. Miserable means miserable. What can you do? You live through it or you die. Living is best, but if you can't live, well, life is like that sometimes. So now I stop everything, and I say it is time for the dead to talk with the dead, and Zvonak has the floor, if there is a floor left to have. This book is incredible. I want everyone to be talking about this. Sorry to start the video off on such a down note, but I just want you to know how incredible this is, and there's no way that my words can be better than Catherine Valente's. On a much lighter note, my favorite sequel is book 2 of the Lightfall series. This is the most adorable graphic novel I have ever read in my entire life. I stand 10 toes down saying that this is my favorite graphic novel series of all time. So in the first one, we were following the girl and the Galdurian. We have this exceptional little duo. Our main character is looking for her grandfather, who is a little older and has gone missing. And we also have this Galdurian who is kind of like a overgrown golden retriever. And it is his job to try to figure out how to save the world. Oh, and they also have a little kitty cat animal companion, and she really steals the show. And book 2 just keeps getting better. I love the way that this art style is able to contribute so much to the story because we have these passages where our main character is incredibly anxious and the background gets darker and we feel that emotion emotion through the art style, and I just think it's so incredibly well done. This author is obviously incredibly talented. I think it can sometimes be hard to nail a sequel, especially in like a fantasy adventure type story, but this one really did a fantastic job. I also desperately need to shout out Everyone on This Train is a Suspect because I loved book 1 so much, and I didn't think it was possible to like book 2 more, but I think I liked book 2 even more than book 1. This was a really fantastic fourth wall breaking thriller murder mystery situation. And in the first one, our author is speaking directly to us. He's a writer of how-to guides for how to write a murder mystery. So it's very tongue-in-cheek, and he's telling us exactly how things should happen. And this is the true story of how everyone in his family has killed someone. Then in book 2, we're seeing the aftermath of this author after he published book 1. He's on this train at this writer's retreat situation. Somehow does the same thing as the first one, which is already a really new and fresh idea, and just takes it to that next level because now he's talking about all of these relationships with his agent and the publishing industry and why the sequel has to be these things exactly. And it's just such an incredible feat of writing to tell you exactly when everything is going to happen and how everything is going to go, and yet still surprise you and keep you intrigued and keep you incredibly invested in the story. I was desperately trying to figure out who done it, and I did not figure it out at all. My favorite reread of the year was the Saint of Steel series because this is my only reread of this year. I reread this entire series at the beginning of the year to get ready for the 4th book, which is Paladin's Faith, which then I ended up getting burnt out of the series and not reading, but I really enjoyed my time rereading this series. It's by T. Kingfisher, who's my favorite author. It's a little fantasy romance series we're following paladins and their love interests. It does get dark. There's more decapitations than you would typically see in a fantasy romance, but still remains cozy somehow. The next thing we should talk about is genre, so I'm gonna bring up my Storygraph stat again. Once again, my most read genre is fantasy, followed by LGBTQ, and then by romance, which is interesting to see that so far up, but I think it's seriously just because I reread the entire Saint of Steel series. Otherwise, my romance reading has been on par, if not lower, than other years. What is interesting though is that sci-fi is not very high up on this list, and last year when I did this tag, I talked about how much I was loving sci-fi and how much I really wanted to read more sci-fi, and I have failed that goal, so drop your sci-fi recs in the comments, please. Next up, we have a new release that I am excited about but haven't read yet. I don't know if we can call this a new release at this point because it came out technically last year, but I really do want to get to this. As well as a couple of horror books. So Paul Tremblay has a new book out called Horror Movie, and Craig DeLuey has a book out called How to Make a Horror Movie. So horror movie themed book reading coming to you soon. On a similar vein, some anticipated releases that haven't come out yet that I am incredibly excited about are A T. Kingfisher, A Sorceress Comes to Call. I think this is gonna be a longer book from her, and I have been waiting for years for her to write a longer book. I will read anything that she writes. I love all of it. I eat it all up, but I'm just chasing the high of the Hollow Places, and I want her to write a chunky book like this again. Also want to mention I Was a Teenage Slasher, Look in the Mirror, and the 3rd book from one of the authors that I loved the favorite sequel of Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret, is coming out in October, and I will be eating that up. Okay, now we have to talk about things that were disappointing, which usually I have not a lot to say about this, but I've had some disappointing things happen this year. Probably the most disappointing, nobody wants a book that you had a 5-star prediction for to end up with under a 3-star rating. The House Witch, I didn't love it. It's cozy fantasy. I thought it was way too long. The humor in here just was not it for me. I just did not get along with this book. I thought it was boring. I wasn't invested in the plot. It didn't really even feel particularly cozy to me. It just felt kind of boring, and I didn't really like any of the characters or care about their relationships, and I just thought the plot was odd. So this was incredibly disappointing, especially because I really wanted to love it. I also was disappointed by A Botanical Daughter. This was one of my most anticipated reads of 2024, and it got weird, you guys. I wasn't expecting it to go where it went. I thought it was gonna be like this cozy horror type situation where we had a creepy mushroom human. You guys know I love fungal horror, and I really thought that this was gonna be everything that I wanted. We have these 2 botanists, it's queer. They create this botanical daughter out of this mushroom fungi situation, but it just got super weird. And there is a sex scene in here with the plant girl. So just prepare yourself for that and know what you're getting into, because I was unaware. The Ministry of Time was also disappointing. I was expecting a cute romance between this man from 1847 who time traveled and our main character who's living in present day. She's supposed to teach him how to acclimate to our timeline and teach him quirky things like how to use Spotify. And it really just felt a little bit disjointed. It was marketed really heavily as a romance, but it really did not, I was not invested in the romance of this at all. I thought our main characters would have been better off as friends. I wanted more of the like quirky getting to know what our present day is like. That's what the marketing of this book led me to believe I was getting, but it had a much more somber tone than that. It really felt kind of slightly like How to Lose the Time War, in the way that we are very much involved in this like government situation trying to figure out this time travel aspect. It's not like a fun rom-com where the time travel happens once and she's just like along for the ride. It's a very much like sanctioned thing. We pulled these people out of time to see what it would do to them, and it gets messy with the time travel aspect, and I just didn't believe in the love, and especially the way that this plot went. I just don't think that this should be marketed as a romance. So know what you're getting yourself into. I wanted a happy, fun, lighthearted rom-com, and that is not what I got. Next up is the biggest surprise, and it's The Cybernetic Tea Shop by Meredith Katz. I did not think that this little of a story, this is under 200 pages. It is 112 pages total. And I felt like the first half of the story was spent introducing us to our two main characters. And I was like, wow, this is a lot of great exposition. I feel really connected to both these characters. We're getting to know this AI repair woman and this AI, and I feel super connected to both of them. I feel like I understand their motivations, I understand why they're doing what they're doing. And then when they finally meet, we're halfway through the story, and I was just so skeptical of how we could establish this relationship between the two and have them significantly change each other enough that we would be invested in their relationship together. But Meredith Katz did that. This author respects your time so well and gives you an incredibly well fleshed out story in just 112 pages, and that is incredibly impressive. I'm also going to give a shout out to What Have I Done by Laura Dockrell. This is about postpartum psychosis, and it is such a well-written memoir. I expected to learn something about postpartum psychosis. I expected this to be a difficult read, but I did not expect it to be done so incredibly well. This author made some really vulnerable and difficult choices in the telling of this story and chose to explain everything from the perspective that she was feeling at the time. So we really get to be in her head as she's having these thoughts and in this psychosis. At the end, we get to see her kind of reflecting back on this whole situation. I think it would have been really easy and really the obvious choice. 9 out of 10 other people who wrote this story would have told it from this perspective, looking back and saying, obviously that thought was not a rational thought, and here's why I know that now, and like really set themselves up in that looking back on their past self from a detached perspective. But Laura really told it to us like it was and put us in her shoes, and I thought that was an incredibly brave choice to make and a really effective one, and I was surprised at how incredibly well written this was. I thought I was going to get a hard-hitting story about postpartum psychosis, learn a thing or two about it. I did not expect the gut punch and the emotional impact that this book had on me, and I'm really grateful for that. My favorite new author should not be surprising. It is Catherine M. Valente. I've now read 3 of her books. This one, Come For Me With Apples, which I read I think a year or 2 ago, and then I also, after reading this, decided I needed to read everything she had written, so I read The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making, and also loved that. Kat Valente can do it all. She can do historical fantasy, she can do horror, she can do a middle grade cozy fantasy. This author has range. If you're a Kat Valente fan, let me know in the comments what I should pick up next from this author. My new favorite character is the compost dragon from The Girl Who Kept the Castle. This is an incredibly cute cozy fantasy. I just finished it today. It was lovely. And my favorite character of this entire year is the compost dragon, who is a lovely character in that book. He doesn't get a lot of page time, but the page time he does get, he really makes the most of. It's just this really funny juxtaposition of what he used to be, which was the unholy worm, and he's so deadly and powerful and dangerous. And then when we get to see him in most of the book, he is just this sleepy little man who has trees growing out of his back, and our main character just feeds him scraps from the kitchen and he makes compost, and he's just the sweetest little boy ever. But when he needs to, he can be that scary, dangerous dragon when she needs him to. to be. The next question is a book that made me cry, and you guys, I can't remember a book that made me cry. I'm sure I cried. I'm sure it does not take a lot to make me cry. I've said this before, I'll say it again. All you need to do is make something bad happen to someone, and then someone else has to comfort them about it. Tears will fall out of my eyes. It's not hard to make me cry. But I don't know which things, if any, have made me cry. So we should probably fix that. I should probably read a bunch of really sad things so that I can make myself cry. So drop your recs in the comments. What books have made you cry? We'll make a video out of it. The juxtaposition to that question is a book that made you happy, and mine is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I really loved this one. The love interest in here reminded me of my love interest because I loved the way that our main character talked about how this man just opened up her world and made her meet so many more interesting people. Like, they go out to a bar and he just talks the ear off of everyone that he's around, and just other people just open up to him and they meet these really interesting characters, and she learns so much about these different people because he asks really great questions and is so attentive and interested in what they have to say. I feel the same way about my partner. Funny Story is Emily Henry's 2024 release, and we're following our two main characters. They have both just been dumped by their fiancés, who have then gone on to marry each other. So in an interesting turn of events, they end up living together and then fake dating, and then they fall in love, and it's an adorable story. The next question is the most beautiful book that I bought, and it's A Botanical Daughter. I didn't like the content of it, but the cover is so pretty. All of these little weird and creepy skulls, flowers, it's just gorgeous. It's stunning. I love it so much. And then we have the book that I'm promising you that I will read before the year is over. Last year, I was successful in reading the book that I promised you I would read. And this year, we will be reading Everything the Darkness Eats by Eric LaRocca. I bought this for my 7 books in 7 days video, and then I didn't read it. And every time I buy a book for a video and don't read it in that video, I feel like it's cursed to sit on my shelves forever. So we are prioritizing this one. I will be reading this during Summerween. It's just like last year when I promised you I would read My Best Friend's Exorcism during Summerween. I did it. This year, we're reading Everything the Darkness Eats. I know nothing about this. I just know that people go feral for Things Have Gotten Worse since we last spoke. I just want to understand what this is about. The book itself is just so dark and so artsy, and it makes me want to know what's going on. The back says that an insidious darkness threatens to devastate a rural New England village when occult forces are conjured and when bigotry is left unrestrained. We'll find out together during Summerween. And then we have a little video question, which is, what is my favorite thing that I have created this year? I think my 2 favorite videos I've made have been the 24-hour readathon, because that was a feat to accomplish, and I feel proud of that. I really loved making that video. I read a lot of really great things. It was my first sponsored video too, which was very exciting for me, and it did relatively well on the channel, so that was exciting. But I think maybe my favorite video concept, even though it did not do well on the channel, was this one, The Cure for Failure, where I read a book from the novel Cure that was recommended as the cure for failure and read it, talked about what I thought about the book in general, as well as it being a cure for failure, and recommended you some other books to cure failure instead of that book. I really enjoyed that video concept, so I would love to know in the comments, for those of you who did watch that video, let me know how you think I can make that video concept more appealing, because I would love to do it again with a different cure from the novel Cure. So let me know, what things do you need to make it more exciting and interesting for you to watch as a viewer, and I will make those changes so that hopefully I can keep doing more videos in that series, because I'm not going to make content that you don't want to see, but I am always willing to receive feedback and improve. So on that note, if you want to see anything specific from me, please let me know in the comments. I am here to make content that you enjoy, and I would really, really love to hear what you're wanting to see from me in the future. And then we have my favorite question of all, which is, what other members of the book community do you want to shout out? And I have a lot of them. I have my little list here. I'm going to try to shout out mostly people that I did not shout out in last year's video, but as always, there are many, many people who I love and watch regularly who are not on this list, because my brain is simply not big enough to keep all of them here and to tell all of them to you. This video would be incredibly long. So here's what I want from you guys. If you have a booktuber that you love, shout them out in the comments. If you're a booktuber and you want to shout yourself out, fantastic. I love to see it. Put it in the comments, and we can all use them as a way to find more booktubers that we love. So without further ado, some larger names that I love and have been consistently watching are Sid Bookworm, Riley Marie, Allie from Allison Pages remains my favorite booktuber. I still go back and watch all of her old videos, and I hope one day that she will be able to come back and keep making videos if that's something that she wants to do, because I think she has a really unique voice and style. Other booktubers I love: Kayla from Books and Lala, Sarah from Sarah Without an H. Her series on reading X so you don't have to, these absolutely wild themed romance videos that she's been doing are so incredible. They are so well done. They are hilarious. I eat up all of them. I get so excited when I see a new one hit my feed. Some new people that I don't think I've mentioned on here before: What Ray Reads, Lit with Kat, Erin Honey, and then they were readers is someone that you guys pointed out to me that I hadn't watched before, and I absolutely love their content. They did a like New York Times connections video with books as categories, and they just seem like two besties who really love talking about books together, and their energy is infectious. Tia Chu is amazing, reads with Shupa. I love everything about her. Her energy is amazing. The music that she puts in the background of her videos, also incredible. Please go check her out. Life of Poetry, incredibly cozy. A Model Who's Read has this really fun energy that I love. And Library Unbounded is also fantastic. Those are all the people that I have to share with you today. Please put your recommendations for booktubers in the comments. If you are a booktuber and you've done this tag already, link it below. I want to go watch it. And if you don't have an online presence and you want to answer these questions, I would love to hear your answers, so please let me know in the comments as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. I'm really excited for the second half of this year. Doing a little bit of reflecting on where I was last year and where I am this year. I had already read 90 books when I filmed my mid-year freakout tag last year, and I do not know how 2023 Katie was able to read that many books. I feel like I am reading every single second of every day, and I just have read basically half of what I read last year. But I feel okay about it. I feel like maybe I was just super excited about everything that was happening. I was still newer in the booktube community. I was still reading backlist stuff, and I was just kind of like eating up everything I could get my hands on. Now that's kind of slowed down a little bit, which I'm a little bummed about, but I think is what had to happen. I don't think I could read more than 90 books in 6 months. So I don't think that was very sustainable. So I think this is actually fine. Also doing a little bit of reflecting on this video. This is the video that Ali from Allison Pages shouted me out in last year. My channel went from having just over 1,000 subscribers to over 2,000 kind of overnight. And that weekend was the same weekend that Dan asked me out and I started dating the love of my life. I'm just really excited to kind of go into this time of year. I feel like seasons and smells and the time of year really holds a lot of weight for me emotionally, and I feel really excited to be experiencing this season again because it was just such a joy-filled time last year, and I'm hoping it will also be a joy-filled time this year. The channel has not been growing recently. It has really slowed down, really stagnated. It's not really growing very much at all. So it's my goal in the next 6 months to really put in the effort to make you really high quality videos, to come up with really interesting ideas for videos so that you guys are excited about them, because I really do want to grow this community. I love doing this. And thinking back to a year ago, I would kill to have 4,000 of you hanging out with me. So I'm gonna do my best to give you incredible content so that all of you guys stick around, and hopefully we can find some more new friends as well. So if you're new here, I would love to have you subscribe and hang out with us and join our little community. I post every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and I will see you all next time.